During week 216 of Brada's Branded Thoughts, an exclusive sit-down with incoming Iowa DB John Nestor. The Chicago native talks about his decision to join the black and gold, plus a guy he looks up to on the Iowa roster, a guy who's figured to be a starter again in 2023. We'll sit down with John, plus I'll give you my top Iowa football portal needs for this current cycle, post-spring portal needs. All that coming up during week 216 of Brada's Branded Thoughts. This is from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Straight from the man cave Kinnick under the kitchen, authentic, original player art prints are being drawn up for Hawkeye fans everywhere. From Under the Kitchen's Murray Legacy print, which features former Hawkeye Kenyon Murray, current Hawkeye Chris Murray, and current Sacramento King Keegan Murray, to football players Lucas Van Ness, Torrey Taylor, and Cooper DeJean, to wrestlers Tony Cassiope, Alex Marinelli, and Real Woods. Oh, and only one of the greatest athletes to ever compete at Iowa, Spencer Lee. There are so many options available, and they make great gifts. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook or at Under the Kitchen's new website. It's underthekitchen.square.site. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Check out Under the Kitchen today and get your authentic, original Hawkeye print. Week 216 of Brada's Branded Thoughts here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. As always, I usually do this at the end of these videos and the end of these podcasts. But if you're watching this show on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. That does help us in the algorithm. If you haven't subscribed to the channel here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, I urge you to do so. Hawkeye coverage throughout the season, whether we're talking about men's basketball, football, women's basketball. We'll even mix in some baseball coverage here as the spring continues. Keep it locked in right here and turn notifications on. Click that little bell for notifications on YouTube. And if you're listening through a podcast platform, go ahead and leave us a 5-star review and tell us why you like this podcast. Whether you're talking about Apple or Spotify, you can rate us and give us a positive review. It's all appreciated. And as always, support our sponsors because they are supporting us. So, week 216 featuring John Nestor. We'll get to our sit down with the incoming Iowa DB, a Chicago native, in just a few minutes. But first, I wanted to address the transfer portal. Once again, the window opens up to where undergraduates can enter the portal freely and go somewhere else, showing no signs of slowing down. Obviously, Iowa has involved itself in the transfer portal more this offseason than ever before under Kirk Ferentz. And that's just the nature of the game. For the people who said that Kirk was never going to buy into the portal, he's never going to be as invested as a guy like Jimbo Fisher, per se. But certainly Kirk Ferentz was forced to go to the portal. There's no question about it. With the attrition, with the disgrace on offense this past season, past couple of seasons especially, Kirk had to go to the portal. We know he did during that first open window following the season back in December. And they did a lot of work in the portal. You think about Cade McNamara, adding a guy who won a Big Ten championship at Michigan, took them to the college football playoff. You think about adding Deacon Hill as some depth at the quarterback position. And, of course, they also added a really good tight end from Michigan named Eric All, who's likely a future NFLer if his back heals properly. They added Nick Jackson, a former Virginia linebacker who has been playing a long time. He's got one season left, and he'll be using it up at Iowa. They added a couple of offensive linemen. One guy decorated from Division II, and that's Dejon Parker from Saginaw Valley State. They added Rusty Feth from Miami, Ohio. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Kirk Ferentz has been more active in the portal than he ever has been. However, this does not mean that Iowa should be done in the portal, and I don't believe they are. But the portal window opened up. I'm recording this on April 19th. It opened up on the 15th, just a few days ago. And the only unfortunate thing about timing with this portal window opening, which again simply means that undergraduates can freely enter the transfer portal. The only bad thing about timing for Iowa is you have a lot of programs whose spring seasons ended this past week or the week before. And now Iowa has one final week of spring practice that overlaps the first half of this open window. It's not a real long window. This transfer portal window is open. So it is unfortunate that Iowa, at least some of the Iowa coaches, will have to kind of be distracted. They won't be able to put all their eggs in the recruiting basket per se for this first week. And don't get me wrong, they got a lot of staff. Tyler Barnes, I'm sure it's all over the transfer portal. So it's not like they can't cover it. But I think possibly moving forward, you have to look at scheduling wise for spring. If this portal window is not moving forward, or I should say moving back, maybe you move spring practice forward, right? I understand weather and I understand all that, but it's unfortunate timing wise that Iowa can't fully focus on the transfer portal for this second window, because I do think it's an important cycle for this staff. So, who will Iowa land out of the portal? I'm not going to be giving you specific names this afternoon. There are a number of big names. I talk with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, over on our weekly show. If you haven't checked that channel out on YouTube, be sure to do so. It's Iowa Football at the voice of college football on YouTube. We have a weekly show every Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. But we talked about some of those big names that I believe Iowa could and probably should pursue. But we're going to talk specifically about positions that Iowa needs to pad or add to as far as position groups. And there are a few unknown factors. Before we get into my top 3 positions of need heading into this transfer portal cycle, let's talk about the unknown factors, the things that I can't account for, that most of you as listeners, as fans, you can't account for. And number one is we don't know how Kirk Ferentz and this staff perceived the lot that they gained in the last cycle. Meaning, yes, I think we can all say that they're confident at quarterback. I think they're pretty confident in what they got with Nick Jackson at linebacker, but depth-wise, we just don't know to the extent, the extent of their confidence in each position group and what they added. We know they had needs on the offensive line. They added a couple somewhat seasoned guys, neither of which have proven themselves at the Power 5 level. Is that enough? We don't know. So we may have opinions on that, whether it's enough, but we're not there, so we don't know. Second unknown factor here is who's leaving. Will there be guys leaving? Spring practice isn't over yet. The portal window will be open for a few days after Saturday, which is Iowa's last spring day, Iowa's last spring practice, which, by the way, is open to the public. I'll be there giving you coverage. And then, of course, following the spring practice, I'll be hanging out with you live during an episode of Hawkeye Hangout here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. But the point is, we don't know which guys will be entering the portal. I'm sure somebody will be leaving. I wouldn't begin to be able to take a guess at how many might leave. But if guys aren't on the depth chart, the post-spring depth chart, or they perceive that they've been beaten out, guys leave. That's just the nature of the game. And that doesn't mean that's not a loss. Just because they had been beat out in spring, or you look at a guy like Charlie Jones who left in June, his reasons for leaving were not necessarily because he got beaten out. I think he would probably say it's because he didn't love where the offense was headed. He wanted to play for a more pass-heavy, pass-friendly offense and a coach who knows how to throw it around the yard and a quarterback he had experience with. So there are other guys out there, but there could very well be more players from Iowa leaving, which would open up needs, open up holes for Kirk Ferentz and the Hawkeyes to fill. So we don't know that yet. As of right now, as of the time I'm recording this here on the 19th, there have been no players that have entered the transfer portal from Iowa during this open window. And the third factor that is an unknown is we're not there every day at spring practice. We will get a glimpse on Saturday at the open practice. It's not scrimmage, it's a practice. But we don't know which positions have developed, right? I mean, theoretically, that's what we're playing spring for. That's why we're these guys are working out during the winter conditioning. And certainly as you head into spring, hopefully there's development at certain positions of need, right? Offensive line is a perfect example. They were bad almost everywhere across the offensive line last year. Who developed, who didn't, right? Which positions are coming along, which positions aren't? Is Dejon Parker everything Iowa thought he would be? Rusty Feth is going to be a guy who's going to factor in as we head into fall camp, but he's still an unknown commodity. They've got guys who are going to be coming in as true freshmen. You usually don't count on true freshmen, but the point is we don't know where some of these guys are that were either here in the spring or are projected to potentially contribute heading into fall, who maybe haven't even arrived on campus yet. So those are all things we're just unaware of, so we can't account for those things. So I'm speaking basically off of what I foresee based on what I saw last season and my projections of the guys that they've added. So let's look at my number one position, and this isn't going to be a surprise to anyone. That is wide receiver. There's no question about it. Iowa landing Seth Anderson in the offseason was big. With all due respect to Seth, and nice kid, his father played in the league, has the all-time single game receiving yards record for the NFL. That's impressive. Willie Flipper Anderson. And he had interest from Georgia Tech, who did offer. Kansas, don't know if he ever got an official offer from Kansas. And of course, Iowa took visit to Iowa. I don't know if there were other schools that reached out to him and offered. But when everybody says about how much high major attention Seth Anderson got, Okay, he got some, but let's call a spade here. I don't know that you can put all your eggs in the Seth Anderson basket. He's also been dinged up this spring. Him and Jacob Bostic have been hurt. So they missed out on Isaac Tisla, the Hillsdale Community College JUCO kid that ended up going to Arkansas. He was a major name on their list. He had offers from almost everyone, ended up going to Arkansas. Not a big surprise given the hype around his recruitment that he opted to go to an SEC school over a run-heavy, porous offense in Iowa. But the point is, wide receiver, I don't believe that they came anywhere close to where they need to be at that position. We also think about one guy. They haven't lost anybody in the portal, but they did lose Brody Brecht this spring. Brody opts to step away from football and fully pursue baseball. I wish him nothing but the best. I talked about that on this channel. I think it's the right decision given his talent on the mound, but that leaves yet another hole in the wide receiver room. And with Bostic and Seth Anderson out much of this spring, they've been running with 2 scholarship wide receivers, Deontay Vines and Nico Ragaini. And yes, I know Alex Moda is going to be enrolling here in a couple of months. Yes, I know Dayton Howard will be joining the fray, as will Jarrett Bowie. I don't expect a true freshman to come in and play right away. Maybe Alex Moda. I've talked about him. I think his speed gives them something they haven't had in a while, at least since Amir Smith-Marset. Amir Smith-Marset, the one thing about Amir, didn't have the best of hands. I think that hurt him not only at Iowa, but as he went to the league, and he's kind of been bounced around a bit. But the point is, Alex Moda might give them something they can use year one, but you don't want to rely on a first-year guy who did not go through spring practice. So wide receiver is a position of need. There are plenty of guys who are going to be out there because, as I said earlier, guys, if they perceive that they've fallen down a depth chart, they will enter the portal. And you may say, well, Corey, why do we want a guy who's fallen off a depth chart or who's been beaten out? Well, folks, beggars can't be choosers, all right? And the bottom line is there are probably about 100, at least. I'm saying 100. I'm not going to say 130 because I think that'd be unfair to Iowa. You got a lot of group of 5 schools out there. 100 or maybe even say 70 to 75 wide receiver rooms that are collectively better than Iowa's. I mean, is that fair to say based on production? And yes, I understand some of those are group of 5 schools that have produced higher numbers against fellow group of 5 opponents. But the point is, Iowa has been so bad at that position. Now, I'm not blaming personnel. I'm just saying development-wise, coaching, everything collectively. The numbers state that they have been really bad at that position for quite a while now. You're telling me that there aren't guys at TCU, at Texas A&M, at Texas Tech, I'm naming a bunch of Texas schools, but across the nation who maybe wouldn't make the top 3 at their position at their respective schools that might compete for a top 3 spot at Iowa. Absolutely, those guys are out there. And would they be game changers? Maybe not, but Iowa needs depth right now. I have confidence in what Nico Ragaini is going to give you. I think I have confidence in what Seth Anderson is going to give you, and you hope Deontay Vines takes a step forward. There is your conceivable top 3 right there. But you need more than 3 guys. And I've heard good things about Reese Osgood. He's a walk-on who's part of the mix. But do we really want to rely on another walk-on? How'd that work out last year? I'm not going to say the guy's name, but people were hyping up, most people in the media, hyping up a walk-on wide receiver heading into fall camp. I'm not saying that receiver who's still on the roster can't contribute or didn't contribute in some regard. But if we're relying on walk-ons to make the difference, especially at a skill position spot like wide receiver in the Big Ten Conference, it's going to be hard to count on that across the board. So they need receivers. Who they target, we'll see. My guess is they will target at least one. And I'll just say this before we move to my second position of need. I'm going to give you my second and third positions of need for Iowa football in this cycle. But I'll also say this. If Iowa had their choice of 2 players, and they could have any players in the country, you know who I'm adding? I'm not talking about specific names, but you know what position I'm adding? Both players would be at wide receiver. All right. That's how far behind I perceive the wide receiver room to be, talent-wise and depth-wise. So, if I could get anybody and I'm taking just 2 guys, I can only take 2 guys, I'm taking 2 wide receivers. With that being said, my second position of need, if they can add someone here, would be offensive line. Where exactly, I don't know, because there's a lot of bodies out there, right? Mason Richmond's played a lot of ball. Connor Colby's played a lot of ball. We saw Nick DeYoung play quite a bit. We've got Jennings Dunker who's played. Tyler Ellsbury's played. Bo Stevens has played. You add Dejon Parker, as I said earlier. You add Rusty Feth. A lot of bodies. But again, this is where the big question marks come in. How have these guys developed over the last 5 months, 4 to 5 months? We just don't have the answer to that question. And so maybe we'll get some answers on Saturday, but it's just one look into that development during a 1 to 2 hour practice. So I still, based on performance and history, would say that if they could go add a proven starter, which is going to be hard to find, I get it, hard to find in this cycle of the portal. Maybe it's somewhere at a group of 5 level, but somebody who says, hey, I want to go up a level even though I'm projected to be a starter at my school. If you could add somebody like that to help the cause along that offensive line, I would do that. And my third position of need would still be linebacker. I got a lot of confidence in Seth Wallace and Phil Parker, what they do. Adding Nick Jackson, who's a tackle machine from Virginia, was big. However, let's not forget they lost Justin Jacobs to Oregon. They lose Jack Campbell to probably a top 2 round draft selection. And then, of course, they lose Seth Benson, who also declared for the draft. So the point is, they lost a lot there, and the depth just isn't there right now. Now, they'll maybe run more cash. I like Sebastian Castro. So does John Nestor. We'll hear from John about Sebastian here a little bit. But, I mean, look, if he goes down, do they have confidence in somebody else coming in at cash, or do they just go more 4-3? They're going to go 4-3 a lot anyways, folks. That's their base defense. And depending on packages, they're going to have 3 linebackers out on the field at some point. So who are those 3 linebackers? Probably Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson. After Nick Jackson, who is it? Is it Justice Sullivan? Is it, I mean, they got bodies. They got guys. We keep saying that. Maybe it's a Carson Shire. Maybe. But those are unknown. So if you could somehow locate a very proven linebacker, another Nick Jackson-esque type of player, which I understand is going to be a tall order, I would do that. I really do think, though, based on my feel for what I've seen, guys entering, Mark Rogers brought up an interesting point. Some of these 2022 guys who thought they'd break through in year 2 and they don't see themselves breaking through at these big power schools, they may just throw themselves into the portal. We're seeing that already happening. Some of the top wide receiver recruits from the 22 class entering the portal. That might be why, because they thought they'd be in a position to start in year 2 and they don't see that happening, so they want to leave for greener pastures. And that might be a positive thing for Iowa. It seems like wide receiver is the position I'm seeing the most activity in early, which is a good thing. Like I said, I don't know how many guys Iowa will be able to add, and part of this is dependent on the number of scholarships they have available, which is dependent on which guys decide to leave, right? Does that make sense? So we don't know what's going to happen there, how many scholarships Iowa will have available. But if you could land at least 2, I would go after wide receiver. I'd go after 2 receivers first, and then I'd work my way down. I'd look at linebacker or offensive linemen, linebackers, and I'd go from there. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. I know I'm kind of just rambling about this, but I figured we should talk about it because the portal cycle is here. The portal window is open. We'll have spring practice on Saturday morning inside Kinnick Stadium, folks. Hawkeye hangout immediately following. I'll preview that again at the end of this show. But let's go ahead and hear from John Nestor. This is an intriguing kid. He looks up to Sebastian Castro, both guys from similar areas of Chicago. And we spoke with John recently about his decision to sign with Iowa. And he's a guy who would not be shocked to see him end up being a really good safety at Iowa. Phil Parker obviously knows how to identify defensive back talent. Before we get to John Nestor, I want to remind you to check out our sponsor, Iowa Floor Covering, and their Tough Core Click Together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring. If you haven't visited the store in person or haven't checked out their website, certainly do that, folks. Tyler, Ryan, and the guys down at Iowa Floor Covering, they serve you right. They serve you better. They're right in the heart of central Iowa down in Bondurant. Check out their beautiful store here, their beautiful brick store. You can buy their Tough Core Click Together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring at just $269 per foot with self-installation. Yeah, just $269 per foot with self-installation. They're partnering with us as sponsors of this show here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Certainly check out their stuff. iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. It's iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. So again, we appreciate the guys down at Iowa Floor Covering. So without further ado, we give you future Iowa DB 2023 Iowa DB John Nestor. John, how you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
Doing excellent. Appreciate you taking the time. We just got off the phone a few minutes ago with Iowa wide receiver commit, and signee now, Jared Bowie from Tampa. And of course, he's a kid who is going to have to adjust to Midwest weather. You are not.
No.
So talk about your upbringing in the Chicago area. Have you lived there your whole life? Just talk about your Midwest roots.
Yeah. So I've lived in Chicago for the first 12, 13 years of my life. And then my dad was a coach for the Wisconsin Badgers for a season. He was part of their strength and conditioning program. So I was up there for a year, decided to move back. And we've been in Chicago since my freshman year of high school. So a little mix of a change, but I mean, we still got that Midwest feel. And just living in both states. So yeah.
And you've, of course, been committed to this class for a while. Phil Parker knows what he's doing. I guess that's the best way to say that. I said it 4 or 5 times during the show alone. Obviously, he likes your ability. You're a ball hawk. I think most guys at Iowa recruits in their defensive backfield, that they are ball hawks. They have a knack for finding the ball and typically have good hands. Is that consistent with how you evaluate your own game?
Yeah, for sure. I think I bring a versatility to my game. I think I can do a lot of things on the football field. On the defensive side of the ball, I can play man-to-man with anyone on the field, whether it's slot, tight ends, and then the wideouts. I mean, I can come downhill. I can make tackles. I have good closing speed. I can cover really well. So, yeah, I would say that the ball hawking term is part of my game for sure.
Somebody earlier called in and comparing you and Khalil Tate. Just you guys coming in together. What do you know about Khalil Tate? I'm assuming you would project yourself as a future safety. Is that fair to say at Iowa?
Yeah. I mean, I think my most natural position is safety. I played corner my junior year, and that corner position was a lot of man. It was probably 80% of my position was man to man. So no help over the top. It was just me and their best wide receiver. Where I play in the Chicago Catholic League, so it was we're going up against either a Division I receiver every week or a tough, hard-nosed, Chicago receiver. So I can play corner, and I can play corner really well, and I can also come off the edge and kind of cover man-to-man in the slot too. So I can also play the catch position. But I would say probably my more natural position is safety. But I can play wherever.
What was it about Iowa that was attractive to you? I mean, you look through your offers, you had some opportunities across the landscape at some high major schools from the 247 Sports. You had Iowa State, Kansas, Minnesota was in on your Purdue. I am intrigued by the fact that Wisconsin didn't offer you. You have connections there, your family. I don't know how close they were to offering, but what appealed to you about Phil Parker in Iowa?
What's there not appealing about him? He's known for taking these DBs that are low recruited or not as decorated in the recruiting cycle, and he puts them through the Phil Parker wheel, and he puts them out as first round, second round, third round draft picks. He's the best at developing DBs, and when I just saw that, and the proof is in the pudding with him. So when I saw that, just the wide variety of DBs that he has, what's the word I'm looking for? Developed. It was just a no-brainer for me. And he was really straight up with me at the start, super transparent. He it was almost like he didn't want me to come to Iowa. He was not as appealing as all the other recruiters. He's like, hey man, if you want to come here, I'll do what I do. And I'll get you to the NFL. And I was like, all right, sweet, let's do it. So yeah, that was probably the most appealing part about him.
And Seth Wallace was involved in your recruitment as well. Yeah. Those two guys are obviously proven. I know Seth Wallace is coaching linebackers and doing a fine job at that. But so what do you know about Khalil Tate? He's a guy who there's going to be some comparisons because proximity to you and coming in the same class. And I think Khalil's probably a safety, or maybe he moves down to the hybrid position that Iowa has at Cash. What are your thoughts on him? What do you know about Khalil?
Khalil's a great dude, man. So I train with him. I train with him at One Performance right here. And I'm here now, but Khalil is a very athletic, and he's a very smart football player. He like you were just saying, he's a very versatile player. He can play that nickel position. He can play safety, and he can also play corner. I've seen him, and just just seeing him, like we both play on the south side of Chicago, he dominates. And when he goes, when he touches the field, like he knows that he's the best player on the field. And to play with that type of swag and confidence is really, really hard to find. But that's what the Iowa, that's like the mold that Iowa, puts out. Like he's gonna fit in right in with Iowa, and I can't wait to play with him. So I'm very excited to play with him, and
And just glancing through the rest of this class, you're obviously going to be getting to know guys like Keegan Davis, who's an Illinois kid who just committed here recently. Obviously, Zach Lutmer, Aiden Hall. We just had him on earlier. It sounds like maybe Iowa has plans for him at safety and then maybe a move to linebacker down the road. What do you know about those guys?
I mean, as I'm not really sure. I don't really know much about Keegan. I mean, but if the Iowa coaches, if they decide to offer him, I'm sure he's going to fit in right with us. Zach and Aiden are like, they kind of go hand in hand. They're both athletic freaks. They're the type of people that when they touch the field, like that they're like that term they call the freak, or the freak athlete. I know they're super fast, but both. I feel like the kind of like the similarity between all of us is like we're all very versatile. Like we're like our speed and athleticism, and our ball playmaking, like it's all like it all goes hand in hand. And I think that we're all very different football players, but we all share a lot of similarities between all of us. And they're all great guys. I kind of got to know them throughout this recruiting process. Hard workers, I know that for sure. And I can't wait to play with them. They're great dudes.
Any former Iowa DB or NFL DB that you maybe emulate your game after you really admire?
Iowa DB, I would definitely go. I would say Riley Moss or Sebastian Castro. Sebastian Castro, he kind of comes from my area where he lives in Oak Lawn, and that's where I live. That dude has no fear, and I love seeing that type of stuff on the football field. Like that dude will come down. I'm not sure if you saw this play, but he made a lot of big hits. But the Rutgers game where he calls the forced fumble, and Merriweather took it back for 6. I mean, that dude, it just shows, like, especially in big games, he shows up, and he's a little, like, I'm not sure how big he is. I think I heard he's a little undersized, but he's the type of kid that doesn't care, what everyone says. He does his thing, and he plays his game. So I really admire that. Riley Moss, he was my host for the official visit weekend. He's awesome. I mean, he doesn't give a what, So he's a great player too, and I really try to model my game after him. Especially him and DeJean, they're very versatile. They're very confident players, and especially in big games, when they're on man to man on an island, they're really like, hey, like instead of shying away from the big show, they're like, hey, like I'm right here, like I want it, and I try to model my game right after that too.
You Bears fan?
I am, but I'm not. I try to support the Bears, but it's kind of like I get this hope. Like, oh God, Justin Fields he's our guy, and then it's just like they blow, So but I like the Bears. But another DB in the NFL that I kind of model my game after is Tyrann Mathieu. I wear 7 after him. The Honey Badger. Like I watched him growing up play at LSU, and like he's just like a human highlight reel. And like one thing that goes beyond that is like the character he is. He's really for his team, and he's a player that really cares about like his teammates. Like wants to get them better, and it's big leadership on and off the field. So that's who I kind of model my game after as well.
Well, John, it's been a pleasure to get to know you. I know it's a big day, and it's been a busy day, and you're, you don't take a day off, so that's a good sign for what you're going to be getting when you get to Iowa. You'll be here in the summer, correct?
Yeah, June 9th, I think it is.
June 9th. Well, we'll look forward to chatting with you at Media Day in August. And, as you saw this year, I mean, TJ Hall's a great example of a DB who true freshman, he gets thrown into the mix. And not that he didn't go through adversity, but guys, especially in Phil Parker's room, have a potential to play early if they work hard. And oftentimes it starts on special teams, and I know you'll do that. So, John, again, thank you for being here, and we'll talk again soon.
For sure. Thank you. See you.
Thanks, John. As I stated earlier, very much appreciate John Nestor joining the show. Obviously, he's a hard worker, and a lot of these guys that I've had the opportunity to talk with in this 23 class reflect that mentality of, hey, if I can get on the field early, special teams action, I'm going to do it because I want to play. I've heard good things about Landon Van Kekerix, who is, I believe he was the last guy taken, or at least the lowest rated guy in the 22 class. Sounds like he's really come along this spring. Would not be surprised if he ends up playing in special teams in just year two. And that's the opportunity that guys like John Nestor, Aiden Hall, these guys will have. Zach Lutmer, some of those guys may play at their respective positions early, but their opportunity early will be on special teams. Wish the best to John Nestor as he gets there this summer and competes to help them. And injuries always happen, it seems like, in that defensive backfield. And by the way, I didn't mention this earlier, but if there was a fourth position of need I'd throw out there for the transfer portal this cycle, it would be DB, whether it be safety or corner, simply because it seems like guys are always getting hurt there. Iowa did lose Riley Moss. They did lose Kayvon Merriweather. And I know Phil Parker briefly pursued a DB from Harvard, so that would tell me that Iowa perceived a need to be there. Depending on what development occurred at DB this spring, that could also be a position of need. We'll see how many guys Iowa takes. I doubt Iowa takes 3 or 4 guys. My guess is they take 1 or 2 and call it a day. Appreciate you tuning in for another episode of Brada's Branded Thoughts here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Again, folks, Saturday after the spring practice, later in the afternoon, we'll have a live show right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Hawkeye Hangout, time to be announced, but stay tuned right here. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, and turn notifications on so you know when we're going live Saturday for a live call-in show following Iowa football's spring practice inside Kinnick Stadium. We'll talk to you soon.